Hello everyone, this is the research article analysis of Ms. Janine Abol, Leila Luania, Princess Aisha Ordonio, and Fiza Jean Rais, based from the Module 4 of Physical Chemistry 2, Processes at Solid Surfaces. The topic we choose is one of the 8 journals from ScienceDirect.com entitled Removal of Heavy Metals from Wastewater Using Agricultural and Industrial Wastes as Adsorbents. The author is Ms. Hala Ahmed Higazi from Housing, Building and Research Center in Egypt. The keywords for these journals are adsorbents, adsorption, agricultural waste, industrial waste, heavy metals, and wastewater. The foundation of this study is the excessive release of heavy metals into the environment due to industrialization and urbanization, which has posed a great problem worldwide because these do not degrade into a harmless end products. Studies shown that adsorption process is a highly effective technique for removal of heavy metals from waste stream, and activated carbon has been widely used as an adsorbent. However, activated carbon remains an expensive material. Therefore, there is an urgent need that all possible sources of agro-based inexpensive adsorbents should be explored, and their possibility for the removal of heavy metals should be studied in detail. The objective of this research is, first, to contribute in the search for less expensive adsorbents and their utilization possibilities for various agricultural waste byproducts, which are in many cases also possible pollution sources, and second, to evaluate rice husk and fly ash as the possible alternatives for the elimination of heavy metals from wastewater.
The figures show the experimental work program on each low-cost adsorbent, which is the rice husk and the fly ash. The adsorption of heavy metal ions by low-cost adsorbents was evaluated under various conditions such as pH, heavy metal concentration, the mixing speed, and the adsorbent dose through both kinetic and isotherm studies. The optimum removal condition was also identified for each metal ion. So the figure shows the overall flow of the experimental work of the study. So the rice husk is contacted with the metal solution in a shaking bath to identify the best metal removal ratio. Metal solutions of copper, nickel, and iron were prepared by dissolving copper sulfate, nickel nitrate, and iron sulfate separately in a double distilled water in order to result in known concentrations of the metal ions required and to make synthetic wastewater. Adsorption batch experiments were carried out by shaking a series of bottles containing various amounts of each of the low-cost adsorbents and heavy metal ions at different pH. The pH of the slurry was adjusted to a desired value in the range of 2 to 10 and was agitated in a shaking bath for 20 minutes until the pH was stabilized. Then, the nickel, iron, and the copper ions were added to the bottles to make initial concentrations of 5 to 30 mg per liter, and the bottles were further agitated for 2 to 2.5 hours until equilibrium was obtained. The residual concentration of heavy metals was determined by an atomic absorption spectrometer. The study utilized atomic absorption spectroscopy, often known as AAS or AA spectroscopy, which is one of the earliest methods for elemental analysis. By using certain electromagnetic radiation wavelengths from a light source, atomic adsorption spectrometry may identify elements in their liquid or solid samples. Different wavelengths will be absorbed by different elements, and these absorbances are measured in comparison to standards. The detection and measurement of certain elements depends on the wavelength and the intensity of the light. This technique is employed to determine the effect of the amount of the adsorbents on the removal of the heavy metal ions. Therefore, the removal efficiency for different adsorbent doses are obtained. The residual concentration of the heavy metal ions, the copper, iron, and the nickel, were determined through AES. The concentration of the ions at the outlet are obtained and compared to the controlled initial concentrations of the ions, resulting to the determination of the removal ratio. After the solutions were agitated in a shaking bath and after obtaining equilibrium and further analyzing through AES, the residual concentration of the heavy metal ions at the outlet were determined. Therefore, the concentration of the adsorbates, which are the metal ions that attach to the locus adsorbens, the rice husk, and the fly ash, were determined.
So the next part of this presentation is the highlights of the results. This article presents a review of the use of agricultural and industrial wastes as adsorbents for the removal of heavy metals from wastewater. Some of the key highlights of the results are the following. First, results show that low-cost adsorbents can be fruitfully used for the removal of heavy metals with a concentration range of 20 to 60 milligrams per liter. Second, the results of using real wastewater show that rice husk was effective in the simultaneous removal of iron, lead, and nickel. Third, the results of using real wastewater show that fly ash was effective in the removal of cadmium and copper. Lastly, results also revealed that the contact time required for optimum adsorption was 2 hours. pH range that worked best for heavy metal adsorption was 6 to 7.0, and the percentage of removal of heavy metals was dependent on the dose of low-cost adsorbent and adsorbent concentration. To elaborate this, let us move on to the next slide. So for the first highlight, results show that low-cost adsorbents can be fruitfully used for the removal of heavy metals with a concentration range of 20 to 60 milligrams per liter. Different types of agricultural and industrial wastes, such as peat, coconut coir, sawdust, rice husk, fly ash, sugarcane bagasse, and others have been investigated as potential adsorbents. However, this article focused more on the results of rice husk and fly ash on the removal of Fe, Pb, Ni, Cd, and Cu. For the next highlight, the results of using real wastewater show that rice husk was effective in the simultaneous removal of iron, lead, and nickel. As we can see in the first table, Fe removal using rice husk increased from 68.59% to 99.25%. This has been determined with the increase of the amount of adsorbent concentration. For the next table, lead removal with rice husk increased from 22.22% to 87.17%. And lastly, for the last table, nickel removal using rice husk increased from 94.88% to 96.95%. All of these percentages are much greater than the fly ash percentages. With that, this indicates that rice husk was indeed more effective in removing heavy metals such as iron, lead, and nickel than fly ash. On the other hand, the results of using real wastewater show that fly ash was effective in the removal of cadmium and copper. As we can see in the first table, cadmium removal using fly ash varied from 25.21% to 73.54%, which can be determined with the increase of the amount of adsorbent concentration. For the next table, copper removal using fly ash varied from 37.38% to 98.54%. All of these percentages are much greater than the rice husk percentages. With that, this indicates that fly ash was indeed more effective than rice husk in removing heavy metals such as cadmium and copper. And lastly, results also revealed that the contact time required for optimum adsorption was discovered to be 2 hours, while the pH range that worked best for heavy metal adsorption was 6 to 7.0. Also, the percentage of the removal of heavy metals was discovered to be dependent on the dose of low cost adsorbent and adsorbent concentration. This is because the adsorption process is influenced by the availability of active sites on the surface of the adsorbent, which in turn is dependent on the adsorbent dosage and concentration. At low adsorbent doses or concentrations, the number of active sites available for adsorption is limited, which may result in incomplete or inefficient removal of heavy metals from the wastewater. On the other hand, at high adsorbent doses or concentrations, the number of active sites available for adsorption may be in excess, which may lead to saturation of the adsorption capacity and a reduced percentage of removal. Therefore, it is important to optimize the adsorbent dose and concentration for each specific application to achieve the highest possible percentage of removal of heavy metals. The optimum dose and concentration may vary depending on the characteristics of the wastewater and the properties of the adsorbent being used.
Going through the interesting points of the study or the research. The research is mainly concerned with how heavy metals can be removed from wastewater using industrial and agricultural waste as adsorbents. The following are some of the reasons why this research is interesting and why the group chosen this research. First, the importance of environmental and public health concerns. Since water pollution is one of the urgent world environmental issues, heavy metals are considered as one of the pollutants. It imposes a concern about its harmful effects on human health and the environment because of its toxicity, mobility, persistence, and damage, especially to the environment. This study also advocates to minimize the increasing cases of pollutants by reducing the heavy metals and using agricultural and industrial waste as a solution to the said problem. Second, the availability and affordability of agricultural and industrial waste materials. One of the most effective methods for removing heavy metals from wastewater is adsorption. Finding the best possible adsorbent is crucial, and it's also important to consider the adsorbent's cost and degree of processing. These waste materials are widely available and have been recognized to be sustainable due to their wide range of properties. Using agricultural and industrial waste materials is not merely abundant in nature, but it has the potential to optimize waste disposal difficulties by reducing waste production and environmental effects. This absorbent is also inexpensive because it can work at full capacity without an extended procedure, costly chemicals, or expensive equipment. Additionally, this absorbent material has the capacity to be recycled into yet another useful material. Third, the adsorption capacities of waste materials in the study have shown great percentages for the removal of heavy materials. The justification why the absorption capacity of waste materials for heavy material is quite remarkable because of the qualities of the waste material, such as its high surface area, porous structure, chemical composition, cost effectiveness, and etc. The two absorbents showed high rates of effectiveness in the removal of iron, lead, and nickel for rice husk, whereas the removal of cadmium and copper for fly ash in wastewater. The adsorption capacity might be affected by the pH of the wastewater, concentration of heavy metal, temperature, and chemical compositions based on its functional group presence. The scope of the study is quite promising since it deals with how to reduce waste and use waste as a solution for another concerned issue. Aside from the reasons mentioned above, this study is compelling because it deals with a diverse absorption mechanism such as ion exchange, surface convection, precipitation, and physical forces. It offers a sustainable solution for the urgent concern over environment pollution and human health hazards. The possibilities for a future that is more environmentally friendly and sustainable are encouraging as an outcome of the field's outgoing study and development.